What would you do if 7 million rounds of ammo simply vanished? Not misplaced, not lost in transit, but outright stolen in what looks like one of the smoothest, most well-planned heists in recent history. This isn't just some random robbery. This was a deliberate, calculated hit on two trucks carrying enough firepower to supply a small army. And here's the kicker. These trucks weren't rolling through the middle of a war zone. They were en route from an ammo factory in Mexico to Texas, carrying legal shipments of 5.56, 40, and 22 LR, among other calibers. But before they could cross the border, they were stopped, emptied, and left for dead. Now, you'd think a theft of this magnitude would be making headlines everywhere, right? If 7 million rounds disappeared off a US highway, we'd be seeing emergency press conferences and federal task forces swarming the scene. But since this happened in Mexico, the real reason I'm talking about this today isn't just because of the heist itself, but because of the hypocrisy surrounding it. Mexico has spent years blaming American gun manufacturers for the violence in their country, even filing billion-dollar lawsuit against companies like Smith & Wesson. But here's the truth. Mexico isn't just importing American guns. It's exporting its own ammunition. So let's break this down. Where did the stolen ammo actually go? Who's behind it? And why isn't anyone talking about it? The heist. What happened? Alright, let's go into the details of this heist. The stolen shipment came from Aguila Ammunition, one of Mexico's largest ammo manufacturers. Two trucks, fully loaded with ammo, left the factory bound for Texas. Somewhere along the route, they were stopped by a group of armed men, and here's where it gets really interesting. Not a single shot was fired. No firefight, no standoff, no reports of violence. The thieves knew exactly what they were after. They took every box of ammo from both trucks, then vanished without a trace. A few days later, authorities found the abandoned vehicles completely emptied. Now, let's break down what was stolen. The vast majority? 5.56 NATO rounds, the bread and butter of both military and civilian shooters. Next, 40 caliber rounds, typically used by law enforcement and security forces. Finally, 22 LR and a few mixed calibers, likely thrown in as part of the shipment. Every single round? Gone. The fact that only two trucks were hit is a huge red flag. Mexico's roads are full of shipments every day. Why these two trucks? And why did the thieves seem so well prepared? This wasn't some opportunistic highway robbery. This was an inside job. Think about it. Someone had to know exactly which trucks to target. Someone knew when they would be on the road and what they were carrying. And someone made sure that when the moment came, the job was clean. No resistance, no mistakes, just 7 million rounds disappearing without a trace. And here's the real problem. If this ammo wasn't meant for legal sale in the US, but instead ends up in cartel hands, who takes the blame? Because right now, Mexico wants to sue American gun manufacturers for cartel violence, but their own ammo industry is leaking millions of rounds into criminal networks. So where did the stolen shipment go? And who's really benefiting from it? That's what we need to talk about next. Now, here's where things start to get real interesting. While Mexico is out here filing billion-dollar lawsuits against American gun manufacturers, blaming them for the cartel violence that's ripping their country apart, their own ammo industry is hemorrhaging millions of rounds straight into criminal hands. They want to point fingers at US companies, but how do they explain 7 million rounds of stolen ammo? Ammo that was supposed to be heading to Texas, but instead is likely fueling the very cartels they claim to be fighting? Let's get one thing straight. If 7 million rounds of ammunition were stolen in the US, the government would be all over it. It would be a national security issue, an FBI investigation, press conferences left and right, but since it happened in Mexico? See, here's the thing. Mexico's government is quick to blame US gun companies, saying their firearms are responsible for the bloodshed in their street. But they don't like to talk about how their own ammo plants are constantly being raided, their shipments hijacked, their stockpiles mysteriously disappearing. You can't have it both ways. You can't sue American companies while failing to secure your own supply chains. And it's not just about this one heist. This isn't an isolated incident. This is part of a much bigger pattern. Mexico produces a massive amount of ammunition, and a significant chunk of it is ending up in cartel hands. If you really want to talk about the flow of weapons and violence, you have to look at both sides of the equation. Guns don't shoot without ammo. And if Mexico can keep its ammo from being stolen and smuggled to cartels, how can they turn around and blame America for their own gun problem? Let's put it into perspective. Mexico claims that the US is responsible for the cartel firepower because American-made guns make their way south. But now, we're seeing a reversal. Not just guns going south, but Mexican ammo going north. You see how that works? You can't claim victimhood while fueling the same fire you're complaining about. And the craziest part, no real effort is being made to find out where the stolen ammo went. No task force, no large-scale investigation, just 7 million rounds vanishing into thin air. And if you think that ammo didn't end up in the hands of cartel, I've got a bridge to sell you. This is the hypocrisy that no one wants to talk about. Blame the US all you want, but maybe it's time to clean your own house first. Now let's talk about how this heist actually went down, because the more you look at it, the more obvious it becomes. This was an inside job. Think about it. You've got 2 trucks, loaded with 7 million rounds of ammo, traveling through Mexico. Somehow, armed men knew exactly when and where to strike. They didn't stop just any trucks. They stopped the right trucks. They didn't steal anything else. They didn't hurt anyone. They were there for one thing and one thing only: the ammo. And once they got what they came for, they vanished without a trace. There's no way a bunch of highway bandits just happened to stumble upon millions of dollars worth of ammunition and decided on the spot to pull off a flawless heist. No, this was planned. Someone on the inside tipped them off. Someone who knew when the trucks were leaving, what route they were taking, and what they were carrying. Now let's talk about the ammo manufacturer, Aguila. This isn't some small operation. Aguila is one of the biggest ammo producers in Mexico. So how does a company that size just lose 7 million rounds without a fight? No armed security escorting those trucks. No tracking system, no resistance. That's not just incompetence. That's a setup. And let's be real. If you were a cartel looking to stockpile ammo, what's the easiest way to do it? You could smuggle it from the US. Sure, but that's risky. Border checkpoints, ATF agents, seizure, or you could just have someone on the inside of a major Mexican ammo factory set up a shipment that never makes it to its destination. That's a lot cleaner, a lot easier, and a lot harder to trace. What we're looking at here is a coordinated effort. Someone inside Aguila or someone with access to their logistics likely set this up, whether it was bribe employee, corrupt officials, or direct cartel involvement. It doesn't really matter. What matters is 7 million rounds of ammo didn't just disappear. They were directed. And the most likely destination? Straight into cartel stockpiles. So the question is, if Mexican authorities know this is happening, why aren't they doing anything about it? The answer? Maybe they don't want to. Maybe they can't. Maybe, just maybe. Some of them are in on it too. Now, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Because what happened here, this heist, this massive ammo theft, is just a symptom of something much larger. For years, Mexico has been pointing the finger at the US, claiming that American guns are fueling their cartel problem. But here's what they won't admit. Their own ammo industry is fueling the very same violence. Because let's be honest, what good is a gun without ammunition? You can't blame American gun companies for cartel firepower when you're supplying them with the bullets to pull the trigger. This goes beyond just 7 million rounds. This is about a much larger pattern of illegal arms and ammunition circulation. While the Mexican government is busy filing lawsuits against Smith & Wesson and the US gun manufacturers, they're conveniently ignoring the fact that their own weapons factories are constantly being hit. Their shipments are going missing, and their stockpiles are being raided. And here's the reality that no one wants to talk about. Guns don't flow just one way across the border. Sure, some US-made firearms make their way south, but in the last few years, we've seen a growing trend of weapons and ammunition moving into the opposite direction. That's right. Mexican-made ammo is now being smuggled into the US. In other words, the very thing Mexico is accusing the US of doing is something they're guilty of themselves. And here's why this matters for gun owners in the US. When stories like this come out, when millions of rounds go missing, it gives anti-gun politicians all the ammo they need to push for tighter regulations, more restrictions, and more crackdowns. It's not just a Mexican problem. It's a Second Amendment problem. So instead of taking responsibility for their own failures, instead of cleaning up their own house, Mexico would rather shift the blame. But the facts are clear. They have a massive issue with securing their own ammo, and the cartel violence they claim to fight is, in part, fueled by their own industry. At some point, they're going to have to own up to it. Now, let's bring this home, because this isn't just a story about Mexico. This is a story that affects every single gun owner in the US. Think about what happens when something like this occurs. Millions of rounds of stolen ammo. No answers, no accountability, and when the dust settles, who do you think ends up paying the price? We do. Every time there's an arms-related scandal, whether it's a heist like this, a smuggling ring or cartel weapons bust, it becomes another excuse for anti-gun lawmakers to push their agenda. Even though this has nothing to do with American gun owners. Even though this was a Mexican problem, with a Mexican ammo factory. So you can bet that some politician somewhere is going to use it as another reason to push for tighter ammo regulations, more licensing, and more control over what we can't and can't own. And let's not forget that stolen ammo wasn't supposed to stay in Mexico. It was on its way here. That means, somewhere out there, there's a massive shipment of unaccounted for rounds, and we don't know who's selling them, where they were ending up, or what the fallout could be. This is why it's more important than ever to stay informed, stay engaged, and keep pressure on lawmakers to protect our rights. Because the last thing we need is for a crime that happened in Mexico to become another excuse to restrict law-abiding gun owners in America. So let's recap. 7 million rounds of ammo, gone, a carefully executed heist, a likely inside job, and a Mexican ammo industry that's feeding the very violence they claim to be fighting. And yet, instead of taking responsibility, Mexico's still busy blaming the US, still suing our gun manufacturers, still pretending like they're just the victims in all of this. So what do you think? Was this an inside job? Was this ammo always meant for cartel hands? And more importantly, why isn't anyone talking about it? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button. It helps get these messages out, and trust me, we're just getting started. Thanks for watching, and as always, stay safe, stay informed, and protect your rights.